All right. Hello again, adventurers, and welcome to another exciting episode of D&D Deep Dive, the show where we dive deep into classes, subclasses, and features so that you can get the most out of playing with them. Today, we've been slowly working our way through the feats in the player's handbook, and that's just where we're going to continue. So let's dive right into it, simply because there's still a ton of feats to go over, and yeah, I've got so much stuff on my desk right now. It's insane. We've just got a ton of stuff to go over, so I'm going to jump right back into it. So then the next feat we're going to cover is called Mage Slayer. This is another feat that I have not seen used at any of the tables that that I've run either in my own games or in my days doing convention stuff. And it's another one that I think is really underutilized, and I think that the reason behind that is the fact that Mage Slayer has a very specific use, and if you're not running into magic users regularly, it can feel like this particular feat is just useless. It is heavily dependent on the enemies that you're facing. That being said, low level Mage Slayer is not all that great, because there's not a ton of low level casters that you face in 5th edition, just in general. But as you get to higher levels, casters become more and more of a thing, to the point where even some of the monsters will be given a few spell levels and things like that, and they'll have concentration things, and that's where this can really shine. So it gives you the 3 abilities. The first, when a creature within 5 feet of you casts a spell. Wow, excuse me. This is something went down the wrong tube there. When a creature within 5 feet of you casts a spell, you can use your reaction to make a melee weapon attack against that creature. This is pretty basic, with the idea that this whole Mage Slayer is built around the idea of you're a melee attacker that is really good at taking out spellcasters. In general, spellcasters are going to have lower-ish AC than their melee counterparts, and that's because they're designed to be far back. So one of the things that makes a good use of this feat is having a class that can move a lot. Rogues with their ability to dash using their cunning action. Monks with the fact that they get extra movement and they can step of the wind. Barbarians, where they just get extra movement. All of those make pretty good Mage Slayers, because you have to be able to get to the mage for all of these abilities to work. Now, this is something that's somewhat common when a mage gets cornered, is they'll do something like the Thunder Wave, or just something to get some distance between them and their attacker. With this, you can actually get an attack in there whenever they try and use some sort of area spell, because anything with a range, anything with a spell attack roll, they're going to have disadvantage on. So a lot of times they will just use things that make you save, And this means that if they try to do that, you're going to be able to bop them. Another thing that's really good about that we'll go into with some of the other ones is uh, a huge limiting factor to Magic, an essential limiting factor in the fifth edition is concentration spells. Concentration spells require you to concentrate on them to continue getting whatever benefit it is. You can only have one concentration spell going at a time, and anytime you take damage, you have to make a concentration check. A lot of the really good spells that can really shift battle, things like dominate person, haste, other things like that, require concentration. And one of the most effective ways to get rid of concentration for an enemy is just hit them a lot. You don't have to do a ton of damage, though. If you can do a massive amount of damage in a single attack, it's much easier to make them break concentration. But if you just have them rolling, 6 or 7 times during a turn because they're getting attacked by 2 or 3 different people, statistically they're going to fail eventually. So this is a nice way to get those concentration checks going, even when it's not your turn. Speaking of concentration, the second ability, when you damage a creature that is concentrating on a spell, that creature is at a disadvantage on the saving throw it makes to maintain its concentration. So another really important thing is, again, concentration spells are really important in 5th edition, and the Mage Slayer is designed to take out mages, so giving them an extra boost of ability to attack and get rid of some of the more powerful spells a spellcaster can use makes perfect sense. And again, when you are using a class that gets a lot of attacks, like fighters can be really effective mage slayers with all the attacks and then their action surges. And like I said, I'm a little bit partial to monks because they're my favorite class, but monks can be crazy good mage slayers. And then the final one, you have advantage on saving throws against spells cast by creatures within 5 feet of you. Another super useful thing, especially for both monks, monks, rogues, and rangers. All can get a version of what's called evasion. Monks and rogues get it as part of their class at different levels. Rangers get it as part of a subclass if you become a hunter ranger. It's one of the choices you can take. What evasion does is it basically means if you're making a dex save against a spell that you can see, if you fail it, you're only going to take half damage, and if you succeed, you're going to take no damage. We've already talked about smart mages will use saving throws to spells instead of attack rolls when people are real close to them. Most of those require dex saves, so with those 3 classes, you can have them trying to just blow you away with really powerful spells, and you're taking 0 damage because you are also getting advantage on that. And then combine that with them having disadvantage on concentration checks, and you've really limited enemy spellcasters. I've also talked a fair amount about action economy and what that entails, and the ability to get rid of a concentration spell affects the action economy as well, because that just means that the action they spent to cast that spell was based on the idea that I'm going to get multiple turns of use out of this, and you just taken that away. Most of the concentration spells aren't really worth it if they don't last for a bit. So really effective. The other thing I'll mention real quick before going to the next one is Rogues, I mentioned rogues can make really good mage slayers simply because they can get there quickly. With their sneak attack damage and the fact that they can, with mage slayer, they give them disadvantage on the concentration check. They can be concentration killers. The way a concentration check works is the DC is either 10 or half the damage that they took that forced them to make the concentration check. So unless you're doing more than 22 damage in a single attack, the DC is always going to be 10, and a concentration check is D20 plus their con modifier. So getting a 10, not that difficult. However, Rogue goes up and does 30 or 40 damage in a hit. Well, now they've just reduced their chance of saving pretty significantly, and they have disadvantage. So, again, like I said, I think it's really cool. It is very dependent on the opponents you're fighting, but as you get higher levels, you will deal with spellcasters. So definitely a nice higher levels as a skill. Next one, probably like the second or the third most used feat that I personally see when people are doing the theory crafting. I use this feat all the time for player faves, and that is Magic Initiate. The basics of it is you choose a spellcasting class, which are Bard, Cleric, Druid, Sorcerer, Warlock, or Wizard. You get to learn, you learn one first level spell, and two cantrips from that class's spell list. Your spellcasting ability is the same one that class would use. So wizards use intelligence, sorcerers use charisma, things like that. The reason this is so useful is instead of having to dip into one of those classes and waste an entire level on it, you can use one feat, get two cantrips, which cantrips can be incredibly useful because they their damage increases with your character level, not your spellcaster level. So if you pick up, let's say, a warlock's Eldritch Blast, at 5th level you'll cast, you'll make 2 attacks. At 11th level you'll make the 3 attacks. Even if that is your only magic at all, and the rest of your character is just built around melee and things like that, like you're just a straight up fighter, that means you no longer have to carry ranged weapons because you have a ranged spell attack that you can just shoot off and do damage with. One of the things that I actually had to ask, can't even remember who does it. The guy at Wizards of the Coast that does this Sage Advice. There are a few Blade Singer cantrips that were introduced in the Sword Coast Adventures guide. And what they do is they have you make a weapon attack, and then they add the damage onto it in various ways. The one that's most popular is Green Flame Blade, or I think Thunder Blade, or something similar to that. Those are the two most popular. Rogues, when they make a weapon attacks, they can add their sneak attack damage if certain conditions are met. So if you could combine sneak attack and green flame blade, the basics of it is green flame blade does your weapon damage plus your ability modifier damage to another target. So you'll do your weapon damage to one to target, and then a target next to them gets burnt. However, when it levels up, it adds a D8 of damage to both of those. So at level 5, you'll do your weapon die plus a d8 of fire damage. At 11th level, it's your weapon plus 2d8. D8, and at 17th, it's your weapon plus the 3d8. When you could combine that with a rogue's sneak attack, which can get massive, and things like critical hits, you have a massive damage spun to the point where it almost doesn't make sense to not to take this feat as a rogue at least once. Get yourself a green flame blade, and go to town, because rogues don't get extra attacks. So using their action to attack or using their action to cast a spell, they still get the same number of attacks. And when they do damage, they do a lot of damage. And now we're just adding more dice on to it. That's my only issue with the fact with this feat is it's really easy to be abused. One of the reasons it's so common for people to use it. And again, it's a really easy, simple way to add a splash of magic. I've even seen, like, if you're a sorcerer, taking magic initiate to give you warlock or bard's spells, simply so you can get a couple spells that use the same ability score to attack with them, but aren't on your spell list. Yeah, so that one's pretty self-explanatory. Oh, and you get to cast the spells that you learn, the first level spells. You can cast one of those once per day. So you get a special spell slot for that. And you don't get that back until you finish a long rest. So next one is Martial Adept, which again is one of my favorite ones. Basically, what it is you learn maneuvers from the Battlemaster Fighter's maneuver list, which I love. What it is you actually learn to do two maneuvers, and they give you a single, what's called a superiority die, which is the die you use to do it. And I mentioned this before in my psionic feats one, because the martial adept, the superiority die doesn't get bigger with this feat, where if you're a Battlemaster fighter, the die gets bigger and you get more of them to use. So that's the only really limiting feature. But some of the maneuvers you can get are things like disarming strike, which is massively useful, or parry. I mentioned before the defensive duelist is really useful to just give you that. Parry does something similar where it can increase your AC. You don't get to use it as much, but since you get to pick two different maneuvers, you get that little bit more flexibility than you normally would. Yeah, I mean, there's really no other way to go over it other than it's a really useful thing if you are a weapon-based class. You don't even need to be a melee-based. A lot of the maneuvers you can use with ranged weapons as well. So it gives your weapon-based class the ability to control and manipulate the battlefield a little bit more, which is fun. And then the next up is medium armor master. And this is, again, we mentioned that there's two different kinds of armor feats. There's ones that give you proficiency, and there's ones that give you additional abilities. This is the latter, where you have to be proficient with medium armor already. Wearing medium armor doesn't impose a disadvantage on your stealth checks, which is one of the reasons why you generally don't see a lot of rangers wearing medium armor all the time, because a lot of rangers tend to go a little more stealthy. And the other thing, when you wear medium armor, you can add 3 rather than to 2 to your AC if you have a dex score of 16 or higher. So the other limiting factor of medium armor is it limits how much of your dex modifier you can use to increase your AC, because it's a little more difficult to move around in. So a lot of classes that have both light and medium armor proficiency will stick with light, because once you get high enough in your dexterity, um, your like studded leather armor will give you a higher AC than chainmail or something like that. So this helps you to get your AC a little bit higher, and basically allows you to wear, a little bit to tougher, hardier armor. Um, Again, this is another one that you really have to kind of decide how you want your character to play, to really use this most effectively, because there's tons of armors out there, and if you are a dex-based character, which is really the only people that are going to benefit from medium armor master, um, you have to kind of make the decision. Do I want to use this as studded leather armor? Do I want to use medium armor and to deal with the trade-offs? And if you do want to use, that slightly thicker armor, medium armor master is really good. But so is just wearing light armor and not worrying about it. So yeah, it's a toss up. I don't think this is one of the best feats, and I would have liked to see something else in there just to make medium armor more useful. Because it's very rare for me to see characters wearing medium armor in general. Either you wear light or heavy, for the most part that I've seen. Mobile is the next feat. This is another one of the really useful ones, and it's another one that is really underutilized, because people think about it and it's just like, oh, I can move more. Why would I need to do that? Well, we've already talked about things like Charger, or the things like Mage Slayer, or the other things that really benefit from having a high mobility. Well, mobile gives you that, and then some. So the first ability you get with it is your speed is increased by 10 feet. Again, it doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're looking at most characters having a speed of the 30, that's increasing your speed by a third. When you combine that with dash, that's meaning instead of going 60 feet in a turn, you can go 80 feet in a turn, and 20 feet is a big difference when you're dealing with ranges, when you're dealing with weapon ranges and the things like that. Like, that can make or break certain things. However, that's not the only the thing you get, because this is 5th edition, and feats are meant to change things. The second thing you get is when you use the dash action, difficult terrain doesn't cost you extra movement on that turn. Again, can be useful in situations. I see that more as an exploring aspect, because in combat, I don't see a ton of people using the dash action unless you're in a really massive combat arena. But in exploration, dealing with the difficult terrain and stuff like that, that can be extremely useful. However, the final thing is my personal favorite. When you make a melee attack against a creature, you don't provoke opportunity attacks from that creature for the rest of the turn, whether you hit or not. This feat is super useful for surgical strike kind of characters. I've seen rogues use this. Monks can use this crazy good. Where you run in, you have extra speed so you can do this. Do your hits, run away. It's massively, massively useful. Or if you need to get through a group to get to a mage that you're trying to slay, and you don't want to take 100 opportunity attacks, just go up each person, just do a bop real quick, and then run on past. Doesn't matter if you hit. You're just going, and you can get right up to that person without getting any opportunity attacks. Or if you have abilities or weapons like something that's really common if you're fighting things like trolls or vampires, where they have a regeneration. If you've got trolls that are really far apart, and you have a fire weapon, you can go up to one troll, hit him with the fire weapon, so that turns off fire or acid, turns off the regeneration. Run away to the other one, hit it, and then run back out, and you no longer have to worry about the trolls regenerating and becoming a pain. Same is true of vampires and a couple other regenerating type creatures, as you can turn off their regeneration, and mobile lets you do that. It's super fun. Again, it's another feat that you do need to kind of build your character. Build your character so that it can utilize it. You don't have to build the character around the feat, because really any melee character can benefit from it. But if you take the feat into account while you're building your character, you can create some really sick, awesome characters that are just a blur on the battlefield. Next one is moderately armored. This is one of the proficiency armor ones. And again, you increase your strength or dex score by 1. You have to be proficient with light armor, again, for this, because it's going to give you proficiency with medium armor and shields. Again, I don't tend to see a lot of people using medium armor. So that aspect of it, someone might take this simply so that they could eventually get to heavy armor if they wanted to create. Again, so this is something like a wizard that can cast in full plate or something like that. They would have to take a bunch of feats to do that. However, shields can be really useful. Especially since you can get magic shields that increase your AC even further. So something like a wizard that can also wield a shield can be pretty deadly. Because a shield itself is going to increase your AC by 2, just normally. Any magic aspect like +1, +2, +3, all of that goes to your AC. So that's really where I see the benefit for moderately armored, is just giving a character a shield they can use that normally couldn't use a shield. Rogues are another one where they don't have shield proficiency, but could get a lot of benefit out of being able to use a shield, because they don't get multi-attack, and their bonus action really kind of needs to be reserved for their cunning action. So they don't really have, there's not really a lot of benefit to being a dual-wielding rogue unless you choose a very specific subclass. So yeah, that's where I would tend to see people use that if they used it. Again, I don't really see a lot of the armor for feats being used really ever. And I think it's a shame, because again, I like unique characters, and I like seeing people use feats in unique ways. So next one, I have seen this used once, only once, and the player regretted it to the point where I think they asked me if they could rebuild their character specifically just to get rid of this feat. That feat is mounted combatant. This isn't a bad feat by any means, and it actually has precedent from earlier editions where they had mounted combat rules, which they have in fifth edition. And there was a specific class, I believe, called the Cavalier that was actually built to be a mounted combatant, and they were the only ones that ever used any feats like this. But it gives you the three abilities. Yeah, they're all about attacking while you're on a mount. Which, if you're dungeon diving, you generally don't bring a horse with you because they'll break their legs on the stairs. But for first thing, you have advantage on melee attack rolls against any unmounted creature that is smaller than your mount. Most mounts are large, so this is basically if you're on your mount, you will be taking out, having an advantage on anyone that's medium or smaller, which is really, really useful, to be honest. Having advantage on all your attack rolls is really, really useful. However, being in a situation when you can actually use your mounts depends on your campaign. You can force an attack to target it at your mount to target you instead. Extremely useful because the easiest way to dismount someone is to kill their mount. Yeah, there's a lot of other ways to do it, but you can get back on the mount. If you kill the mount, you can't get back on it. And this kind of feeds into the idea of a mounted combatant, someone that's trained to fight on horseback or whatever. They have a kind of symbiotic relationship in combat with their mount. War horses back in medieval and feudal times were as dangerous, if not more so, than the riders on them. And knights that came into combat mounted were deadly. That's the entire reason they developed things like pikes, was to deal with mounted combatants. Even when you go to like to Chinese warfare, they have specific weapons that were designed to take out mounts. So that makes perfect sense. Again, if you actually have a mount to use and you're in an area where you can use that mount. And then the final one, if your mount is subjected to an effect that allows it to make a dexterity saving throw to take only half damage, it instead takes no damage if it succeeds on the saving throw and only half damage if it fails. That is evasion for horses. Again, it's a really cool idea, but it's most campaigns that I've run, almost all the adventures I've run in the Adventures League and things like that, you don't get a lot of options to ride into combat on your mount. You're generally on foot. So that's the only limited aspect. If you have a campaign where you're going to be out in open fields or maybe in the desert or something, this could be a super, super useful feat. I've never seen it used that well. And you really have to build your character around this feat in order for it to be useful, because you have to have a mount. You have to have a weapon that's designed to be used from horseback. So you're not using a dagger up there. The next one is Observant. This one I have seen used to devastating effect. You're really, really observant. Like it's very self-explanatory. The first thing you get is increase your intelligence or wisdom by 1 up to a maximum to 20. Again, very typical. However, these are the things that make it just super, super useful. If you can see a creature's mouth while it's speaking a language you understand, you can interpret what it's saying by reading lips. I cannot tell you, I cannot emphasize it enough how useful lip reading as a skill is, just in general, in real life and in games and things like that. The ability to hear someone across a crowded room is next to none. However, the ability to just read someone's lips across the room is not difficult. One of my favorite bloopers from Whose Line Is It Anyway? And this is where I found out that Drew Carey reads little lips. Wayne Brady was on the show, and I can't remember the other guy's name, but he was a regular on there. It wasn't Colin or Ryan. Anyway, they were supposed to be being frat boys or something like that. And so the other guy mimes mooning the audience. And just for fun, he unbuckles his pants and just takes the back of his pants down just a little bit, but he's wearing boxers, so it's not that big a deal. And you see Wayne just mime it, so he doesn't do that. As they go, the game ends, they go up to the chairs, and under his breath and off mic, so no one hears him, he tells Brad Sherwood that was the guy. He turns to Brad and goes, "Hey, I totally would have done it, but I'm wearing a thong." And Drew Carey just like stops the show. He's like, "You're kidding, right?" Ladies and gentlemen, Wayne Brady just said, and Wayne's just looking at him. He's like, "I read lips." Drew's like, "I read lips. Did you really mean that?" And you just watch Wayne's face just melt for a second. And it's hilarious. He actually goes and he takes the strap out. He shows people he's wearing, like not by taking him off, but he just shows the little strap on the side. He's like, "Yeah, I'm wearing a thong. Some people need support down there." And so yeah, getting back to the game, reading lips is crazy useful. There are so many situations where it's useful, especially in a world where magic has verbal components. If someone starts casting a spell and you're way too far away to hear it, but you can read their little lips, that can give you a clue as to what's happening before it happens. Like it's just reading lips is super useful. The other thing, you have a +5 bonus to your passive wisdom perception and passive intelligence of investigation. I rarely use passive investigation simply because investigation is an active thing. You're actively looking for something, so you should roll. Perception, though, can be passive. And having a really high passive perception, stealth rolls for enemies are made against your passive perception. I had a player once that had a passive perception of, I think, 22 or 23, which basically meant I was never going to be able to have someone stealth up on her character. Mostly because most kind of stealthy kind of creatures, they might have maybe a +4 or 5 to their stealth score, but that still means I have to roll like a 16 or 17 to get to just meet it, much less get past her passive. So that can be really good to just keep you from getting sneak attacked and things like that. Next up, this was one of the most abused feats in the Adventures League. People thought they were so slick and so amazing with it because they would combine this feat with another feat that we may get to today called Sentinel. But it is Polearm Master. It gives you two abilities which are remarkably useful. First things first, when you take the attack action and attack with only a glaive, a halberd, or quarterstaff, you can use a bonus action to make a melee attack with the opposite end of the weapon. Use the same ability modifier as the primary. The damage die is a D4 and it deals bludgeoning damage. It basically meant you could use most often this was done with a glaive. I don't think I think there might have been maybe one or two monks I saw do it with quarterstaff, which is a waste of time because you already have an offhand attack that does a lot more damage. But and I've never seen anyone do it with a halberd. It's always a glaive. And that's just a secondary attack's not really the reason people do it. It is the second ability, which is while you are wielding a glaive, halberd, pike, or quarterstaff, other creatures provoke an opportunity attack from you when they enter the reach you have with that weapon. And this is where it becomes really, really useful. Glaives, halberds, and pikes all have reach, meaning you can attack someone from 10 feet away. Sentinel, as we'll discover later, has an ability where if you hit someone with an opportunity attack, their speed turns to 0. So what I would see a lot of people do is they would build like a fighter, was most often, though I did see paladins that did this too, with a glaive. They would move up to the front of the party, and then whenever the guy that they didn't want to touching the rest of the party came close, they would use their opportunity attack to stop them in their tracks. And if you had multiple characters that had this polearm master sentinel synergy, melee creatures could not get close enough to the party to do any damage. It was extremely effective, especially if you could bottleneck the enemies, because invariably what would happen is you'd find a way to bottleneck them, and then all the other enemies would be stuck behind them, not be able to do anything, because only like one or two creatures could get close enough, and they're fighting the dudes that have the halberds or glaives. So yeah, it's a cool feat. It can be extremely useful, and if you want to be that really kind of cool glaive wielder or guandao wielder, it's a cool feat. The only thing I don't like about this is there's no spears in here, and I've never heard a good excuse as to why spears were not included in Polearm Master. Especially since they even include pikes in these. This is the second one. So that's the only issue I have with it is you should be able to do it with spears. Spears are versatile weapons, just like quarterstaffs. Spears are literally longer quarterstaffs with a pointy bit at the end. They're identical. So that's the only issue I have with it is it doesn't include spears. Next one is Resilient. This is one I've never seen used, but I could see where it might be useful. Choose one ability score. You get the following benefits. Increase the chosen ability score by 1 up to a maximum to 20. Again, pretty self-explanatory. And you gain proficiency in saving throws using the chosen ability. For a feat, it doesn't feel like it does enough. Having proficiency in things like dex saves can be super useful, especially if your class doesn't give it to you. But burning an entire feat just to get proficiency with a single saving throw just doesn't. For me, this feat is just underpowered. Again, if you are playing a character that has really low dex, this is a super simple way to make sure you're not getting destroyed by fireballs all the time. But beyond that, or if you're dealing with Illithid and they keep trying to mind control you or something, increasing your charisma, your wisdom, whatever. could be useful, but beyond that, it's just not that useful. And that is where I'm going to end it for today. We're getting close to 45 minutes here. So that was another page. Looking at the ones we have left, I probably only have one more video this left. So hopefully we get through everything else in the next video. But what are you guys thinking about these feats? In the comments below, let me know. Did any of these feats give you ideas for interesting characters? Or have you seen these feats used in ways that I haven't described? Again, the whole purpose of this feats series is to show people as many different ways as they can use these feats, so that they can create interesting and really unique characters. So if you have a really cool idea for something like martial adept or observant that I didn't mention, let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, that's all for me today, and I will see you guys next time. All right, bye bye.